Welcome to Real Clear Politics for Wednesday, October 8th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. Well, today, former FBI Director James Comey appeared in federal court in Virginia, where he pleaded not guilty to charges of making false statements to Congress and obstruction of justice. The charges were brought over the objection of some career prosecutors. The attorney overseeing the investigation actually resigned under pressure rather than bring the case. Donald Trump brought in one of his own former personal attorneys who did secure an indictment. So, Tom, with the usual caveat that we're not lawyers, let's talk about the politics of this. And I'm wondering whether Comey may come out of this in the catbird seat, because, if he wins this, it will look like it was just a political witch hunt.
Yeah, and I've said that before. Look, that's one of the risks you take when you make an indictment and you go to trial is if you're the prosecutor, if you lose, it looks bad. And certainly this is a highly charged case and one that, certainly folks on the left think is politically motivated. And this is Trump's revenge. If Trump doesn't get revenge, then I'm sure the left will celebrate and that'll be that. I mean, look, I do think Roger Stone wrote a piece for his Substack basically saying, look, James Comey, he and James Comey were, and Carl's mentioned this before, they basically were accused of the same thing. But oh, how differently those two men have been treated. And why is that? There's an absolute, I think, double standard and has been. So Comey's going to get his day in court and we'll see what happens. But I mean, it appears to me it's fairly clear that he lied to Congress. Now, maybe they'll find out that he was splitting hairs and he's technically correct or something, but he claims that he never leaked anything, and that's been contradicted by a number of people, including one of his subordinates. So we'll see. I don't know if McCabe's going to be one of the star witnesses of the prosecution, but there certainly does seem to be some evidence that he is guilty of this, of what he's been charged of.
I don't see it that way at all. Jim Comey is a hard person for me to defend because I find him, he's just a preening egomaniac. But
in Washington, that doesn't mean much. But go ahead.
Well, that's right, and it's not a crime. And if it was, Trump would have to indict himself and half the country, half the city. But and you're tempted to have Schadenfreude because as Tom mentioned, this guy's now has to go through what he put others through. But I don't. This case is weak. The case against Roger Stone was, and I wrote this at the time. I thought it was weak. I thought it was a disgrace, and the jury was biased. They had Democratic Party activists on the jury. That case never should have been brought. Should have been thrown on appeal. We never got to that because Trump pardoned Stone, and Roger was subjected to this very abusive arrest, like they were going after a drug kingpin or a terrorist, all these armed agents at his house before dawn. It was a disgrace, but that doesn't mean this is good. Tom, it's not controversial to say that this was a political prosecution. Trump publicly lobbied for it. The person he replaced, and Andy, I don't mean to correct you, but wasn't just a career prosecutor. It was the person Trump had tapped to run that district as the U.S. attorney. And the guy realized he couldn't get a conviction, didn't want to do it. And so, he was forced out. I do not think this case will go to trial. I think the judge will, he set a date, it's the so-called Virginia rocket docket, January 5th, not 2 years hence, 2 months or 3 or 4 months hence. The pressure that the President of the United States personally put on these people. He prejudged the case, the things he said about Comey. These two men are enemies. And you could even take Trump's side in their dispute because I think the source between Comey and Trump, I blame Comey more than Trump for that relationship going sour in the first months Trump was president the first time. But that doesn't justify this. If it does go to trial, I expect he'll be acquitted. This seems a very weak case. It's not just
you don't think there's any evidence that he was
it's not just a process crime. It's he was pretty squirrely, Tom, but I think he was careful. I don't think he.
I mean, I don't disagree with you. Trump may have prejudiced this case, and he might have spoiled it. But you don't think there's any evidence that James Comey lied to Congress when he said that he wasn't the leaker, that he never leaked anything?
he was pretty cagey about it, Tom. I just don't. I think they're going to have trouble proving that. The the witness that they expected to be a witness, this professor from Columbia, I don't know that he'll testify because he was going to basically testify that Trump. What I've learned in the last 24 hours that he was going to testify that Comey didn't ask him to leak. They went through his emails. They didn't find evidence that Comey in writing that Comey had asked him to leak. Look, Comey is again, he's a hard person for me to love, even in a Christian sense, but I think he was more careful than this, Tom.
You might be right. You might be right.
Yeah. Well, the other aspect of this, the judges in these cases, it's randomly assigned, and the judge is Michael Nachmanoff. He's a Biden appointee.
Trump's already started attacking him, Andy.
Yeah, he said on Truth Social, called him a crooked Joe Biden appointed judge. And then he admitted that the FBI director, because of this, he was off to a good start in Trump's estimation. Again, Tom, helpful, blasting
Of course
the judge.
not. I mean, Trump is every lawyer's worst nightmare. Remember when he was, on trial? I mean, he was holding press conferences and wouldn't stop talking. Even when the judge gagged him, he'd go on talk. I mean, it's just this is what he does. And even when he thinks he's helping the case, he's may in fact be hurting it. So yeah, no, Trump's not helpful in that regard.
It may be that they realize they're not going to win this thing, and they never really, put Trump aside. And it's really just an exercise to try to embarrass Comey and to put him in a bad light and make his life a living hell for however long this trial takes. I mean,
oh hell, and he's going to get another book deal out of it. No, yeah, but
I know. That's why, going back to my original question on this thing, it just seems to me like, if you really thought this through, he's going to get a multiple book deal. He'll get a movie of the week again. I mean, it'll be just, this is,
well,
the
it'll
money
be,
will rain from the heavens on James Comey as a result of this, if he gets off, even if he's convicted.
Phil Wegman and I are going to speak to Eric Trump later on in the show about his new book, which is basically about the lawfare that was, enacted against his father and his family. And so he may have some opinions on this as well.
Guys, Katie Porter, she's running for governor in California, former congressman from Orange County, leading in the polls, including the RCP average. But she is getting some attention for an interview that was aired on Monday, October 6th on the local CBS station. She was talking to journalist Julie Watts, who was interviewing all the candidates in the race. Here's just part of that exchange.
What do you say to the 40% of voters who voted for Trump?
Oh, I'm happy to say that. It's the do you need them to win part that I don't understand. I'm happy to answer the question as you have it written, and I'll answer it.
And we've also asked the other candidates, do you think you need any of those 40% of California voters to win? And you're saying, no, you don't.
No, I'm saying I'm going to try to win every vote I can. And what I'm saying to you is that...
Well, to those voters, okay, so you...
I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
Every other candidate has answered.
I don't care.
Follow-ups.
I don't care. I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation in which you ask me about every issue on this list. And if every question you're going to make up a follow-up question, then we're never going to get there.
Ms.
And
Porter,
we're just going to circle around.
I am an investigative
I have never
reporter.
had to do this before, ever.
You've never had to have a conversation with
to end
a
an
reporter?
interview.
Okay, but every other candidate has done this.
What part of, I'm me, I'm running for governor because I'm a leader. So I am going to make...
So you're not going to answer questions from reporters? Okay, why don't we go through? I will continue to ask follow-up questions because that's my job as a journalist, but I will go through and ask these, and if you don't want to answer, you don't want to answer. So nearly every legislative...
I don't want to have an unhappy experience with you, and I don't want this all on camera.
I don't want to have an unhappy experience with you either. I would love to continue to ask these questions so that we can show our viewers what every candidate feels about every one of these issues that they care about.
So guys, it was a remarkable exchange. But Carl, apparently she did not end up walking out. For the record, her campaign staff says she continued for another 20 minutes. But what do you make of this outburst? And what do you make of her candidacy at this point?
Well, it's a politician. Part of their job, if they want to win elections, is to come across as likable. And Katie Porter seems to think that's beneath her. She doesn't have to bother with that aspect of the job. It's a novel theory of running for office, but I'm curious as to whether it'll work. The most instructive thing there, Andy, they weren't really they were she wasn't really arguing about anything. She was sort of being needlessly combative. The reporter initially asked her, you know, she was talking about California has this jungle primary. You want every vote you can get. You don't know who you're going to face in the runoff. The person leading now is a Republican, Steve Hilton. So she said, what about, and people forget, California is a very Democratic state, but there are more Republican voters there than any other state in the country. And, millions and millions of them. She said, what are you going to do about these 40%? How are you going to appeal to them? And she said, well, I don't need them. And then she started backtracking, attacking the reporter. It was just, it was so trivial and so easy to finesse. And she didn't want to do that. And it made you wonder, well, what kind of governor would she be? What kind of congressman would she be? And then people started, because of this, bring up, well, she'd had restraining orders against her husband and her longtime boyfriend. Her husband accused her of domestic assault. She threw him under the bus when she was running for the House the first time. She later said it was something she was embarrassed that she did. She chose her political career over her kid. There were these rumors when she was Washington that she was difficult to work with, hard on staff. That's just not, none of those things are disqualifying to being a good governor, but it just makes you wonder why what she's so peeved about and why she couldn't just be a little more charming to this reporter who had really did nothing wrong.
I actually watched the whole thing because it was so interesting. She talks to Julie Watts is the reporter, and she talks to all the candidates, and it's a pretty interesting and informative thing that she did. They're sitting in a studio or a control room, it looks like, and they do this. And I should just say too, Carl mentioned a jungle primary, Tom. For our listeners and viewers, that means that all the candidates, both parties, are in one primary, and then the top two vote getters go on to the general election. So that's why it's important to talk about the Republican in this race. But anyway, Tom, what'd you make of this? Really is kind of, I mean, I haven't seen anything quite so raw as this on television in a while. It was fun to see, I guess, but what'd you make of it?
Yeah, I mean,
haven't you been watching Trump press conferences and sessions in the Oval Office? He routinely
No,
attacks
but the
reporters.
thing about it though was like this was like not performative for an audience. These were like two people, and she goes, I don't want to have a unpleasant experience, and the reporter says, I don't want to have an unpleasant, and Julie Watts, I
I
thought
actually thought
handled
that,
it very well.
yeah, I mean, they were kind of talking past each other or going around in circles and couldn't quite understand what the other one was saying. And the part that was sort of in my opinion, made Katie Porter look the worst was that thing when she said, look, I'm a leader. I'm running for governor. She got kind of, got on her high horse. And look, this incident in and of itself, to Carl's point, how much is it going to hurt her? I don't really know. But it did open the door to all of these past things and questions about her. And people are now circulating some of the stuff from her, her court filings from her ex-husband. This is like a decade ago, but she accused him of being, and I'm quoting here, an effing idiot, an effing incompetent. She poured scalding mashed potatoes over his head, allegedly. And he said, quote, she wouldn't let me have a cell phone because she said, you're too effing dumb to operate it. He accused her of throwing toys and books. And then he said, when she gets angry, she will claw and scratch her arms and then say to me, look at what you made me do. Now, that sounds like, disturbing. That sounds like Glenn Close stuff, It makes her seem, just kind of
Glenn
crazy.
Close's character.
Not
Glenn
Close's
Close.
character, I will not be ignored. No, so that's where this is really troubling because it plays back into some of these previous reports, previous accounts, and previous episodes where she's been accused of being, mean. There's as Carl mentioned, stuff circulating about people who worked for her and staff, and so all of that sort of ugliness, the underbelly here has been revealed, and that's not good for her. Now, again, we'll see how this primary ends up. She is leading, but it is, I mean, at this point, there's still a ton of people undecided. She's at I think 18% in our Real Clear Politics average. The next closest person is Bianco at 11, Hilton at what is that, 9, and then Xavier Becerra at like 7.7. So there's a lot of
that
people in
race
this
is
race.
that race is next year, Tom. We don't even know if that's going to be the field yet.
Well, that's where it stands right now. But there's a lot of people that are. There's a long way to go. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But this is obviously not a good news cycle for her, and you can see it in her team's doing damage control.
Well, another story out of LA. This is Kamala Harris. She made some viral news. On Monday, she was promoting her book. It's something called The Day of Unreasonable Conversations. This was in Los Angeles, as I said. It's an event that the organizers describe as, quote, an invitation-only gathering designed to equip creators of culture, television writers, artists, producers, executives, and digital storytellers for the year ahead. And so here's Kamala Harris's advice to these folks.
I'd like to bring it back to the audience, which is this. One of the other reasons I wrote it is history is going to write about this. Yeah. And it was important to me that that be told with my voice being present. And I would say that everyone, we are living history right now. And you all as storytellers are living this. You're not passive observers, you know that. You're living it. And I would ask you that all the emotions that we are feeling, give those emotions, give that experience to those people that you are writing about and writing for. It gets back to my point about helping people just put a label on it, even if it doesn't change the circumstance. Because there's so much about this moment that is trying to make people feel like they've lost their minds. When in fact, these motherfuckers are crazy.
Tom, kind of a word salad, but payoff at the end that the audience enjoyed.
Well, you couldn't really hear that on the audio. At least I couldn't hear. But I mean, there was a huge roar when she dropped the MF bomb there. I mean, so look, Kamala Harris's book tour. We've talked about this. I mean, the book apparently is selling well, and she's selling out these venues. But the clips that are coming out, she was just, I forget where she was the other day, where she was. There's a clip of her yelling and talking about this was the closest race in the 21st century. And that is not, she's up there yelling, like super angry, emoting. It's not a mandate. And the crowd's, going wild. There is something that is bizarre about how much the Democratic Party and the sort of rank and file of the Democratic Party, how excited they get by hearing expletives. I mean, every Democrat now is cursing in public, and it seems like the worse it is, the more they like it. I mean, look, Trump's no angel. He drops, he'll drop language now and then, so maybe he's been part of the problem, but it just seems like, Rashida Tlaib and some of these other folks, I mean, they're cursing nonstop now, and they're doing it on public airwaves. They're doing it on TV shows. They're doing it in all these appearances, and the crowd loves it, so they keep doing it. And this is another example of that. And it's kind of bizarre.
Well, I'm not much. I don't champion the course.
Did that make me sound like a prude, Carl?
Well, no, because you're always using the word bullshit on our show.
That's
so
right.
Maybe sound a little bit like a hypocrite.
Goddamn right I am, Carl.
Not a prude. Listen, I was saying this coarsening of our culture is not a great development. Both parties do it. Trump did it. Biden did it when he was vice president with Obama, famously used the F word. They're trying to be hip, and also it's how they talk in private. So you don't want to make too much of it. But this thing that you mentioned, Tom, about she said Trump didn't have a mandate. I won the closest election. Well, the 21st century. No, it's the third closest.
In the Electoral College.
Well, I don't. No, I'm sorry. There's no way you can make this a closer election than Bush v. Gore. It was 500 votes at.
No, that's true.
Florida.
That's true,
but the technicality there, Carl, is that's 2000. That's the last century, not the.
That's not true.
Just telling you.
Well, that's wrong. The 21st century began January 1st, 2001. And, you know, the case wasn't this, it wasn't before the electoral, votes weren't certified yet. That happened a week later.
Oh,
So
God. Okay.
we're going to be technical. Let's get it right. And there's no way you can say it was closer than the election that Hillary Clinton lost, because she won the popular vote and lost the electoral college. So, I'm not trying to split hairs here. I'm trying to make a more important point, and this applies to Donald Trump even more than the Democrats. But neither of these toxic, dysfunctional political parties will ever admit they really lost an election, because they won't admit they lost an election. They don't have to change in their policies. It's just perpetual campaigning endlessly. If somehow you get one of them to admit they lost the election, they say, "Oh, that's because our messaging was off, or somebody made a mistake, and you and the media screwed it up." This was not a landslide. Trump keeps saying that. Oh, and by the way, Trump didn't acknowledge losing to Biden in 2020, and he still has not acknowledged it to this day. And Trump goes around saying this was the greatest landslide since Alf Landon got beat, or what. I don't know if he knows who Alf Landon is, but you get my point. On and on and on, he says this is a landslide. It was a relatively close election, but it was a mandate. He won the popular vote, and he won all the swing states, and he won much more votes than he'd won. He won much higher vote totals in closer elections than he had before. It is a mandate, and for Kamala Harris not to acknowledge that makes me think, what are we gonna have, another dysfunctional campaign in 2028, and the loser won't accept that?
I don't think that's fair.
And it's part and parcel, Andy. It's part and parcel of her saying couldn't think of a single thing in the campaign that she'd do different than Biden. So,
Look,
right?
You can say she didn't learn any
Nothing's
lessons,
wrong
but
with the
she's
Democratic
acknowledging
Party.
that she lost. She says it's close, but
I think
she's acknowledging
she-
that she lost.
She's saying that it was the closest election in the 21st century. We can argue whether the 2000 election should be counted. And if you're right, if you count that, the George Bush election was closer both in the popular vote and in terms of, there's two ways to look at the popular vote. You can look at it on a percentage basis, and you can look at it as a raw vote basis. And in both cases, the 2000 election was closer. But it's not fair, I think, Carl, to say that she's not. When she says he doesn't have a mandate, that's a judgment. That's not an argument over fact. And
Well, I think it's an important thing to say, because elections are supposed to have consequences. The party in power is supposed to get to do what they said they were going to do. The party who's out of power has to recalibrate and say, okay, where did we go wrong? What should our new policies be? She's not doing any of that any more than Trump did. And again, I don't want to split hairs on this. I want to say, I just think that's not a. I think it's going to remind people that she couldn't think of a single thing she'd do different than Biden. In other words, nothing has to change. They had an open border, no problem. They spent money on. They boasted about how much money they were going to spend on giving illegal immigrants health care. Now they're saying if you bring that up, you're a liar. This constant, situational ethics. It's not situational ethics. It's looking at the truth through a partisan lens, so you never get there from here. I would like her to make an honest accounting of what happened in that election.
I mean,
is that too much to ask? You guys
yes,
think?
Yes.
that's too much to ask.
That's way too
It's
much to
to ask.
hey, I just want to go
She's
back.
going
to the
around.
swear.
She's on tour, basically telling people that if the campaign had just been a few days longer, she would have won, which is demonstrably false. But whatever, she's got her view. She's acknowledged that she lost. She didn't contest the election, and if Democrats don't want to change, that's their prerogative. You can't, they can look at this through the lens and say, "Gosh, it was a really close election, and had we just, turned out a few more voters, like none of this would be a problem."
Yeah.
I don't think that's true, but that certainly could be their viewpoint.
Okay,
I'm just fascinated by the whole swearing. Like she feels like she, MF her in public is I mean,
So
there
Emma
are a
Bryce-
few words that you can say that are stronger than that, and she went there, and the crowd loved it.
Yeah, well, Emma Byrne, she's a science writer. This is her view of it. She says it used to be thought that swearing showed a loss of emotional regulation, a lack of vocabulary. But actually, people with larger vocabularies also tend to have larger swearing vocabularies. And swearing is quite often used as a way of conveying everything from excitement to sympathy, as well as frustration or anger. I think we've gotten over the idea that swearing is just rhetorically a failure. So that's one point of view. It's that Tom, yeah, you're clutching at your pearls and you're out of touch with reality and the way
Well,
people
as the
psychologically
person
react.
as the person on this show who swears the most, that would mean that I have the largest vocabulary.
Yeah, that's kind of idiotic junk social science, but it does remind me of a story. Marco Rubio and this is a true story, and John McCain are walking down the hall. Marco Rubio had Mark Salter, who was McCain's close aide and longtime collaborator as a writer, help with the not ghostwrite, but help write, ghostwriting Rubio's memoir. So they run. So he's walking with Rubio's Mark. He was a senator there, and walking down the halls in one of the Senate office buildings with Mark Salter, and they ran into McCain. And John McCain says they say hi to each other, and Rubio says, "I just watched that HBO thing or that movie Game Change." And it had come out years before, but Rubio hadn't seen it. He said, "You're the hero of that." And then McCain says, to points to Salter, said, "No, you're the hero of it." And Rubio says, "Well, but anyone, but there was one thing, John," Rubio says, and Rubio doesn't really use blue language, as far as I know. And he says, the way they had you talk in that movie, and it's every other word's the F-bomb. He's a former Navy flyer, and it's pretty realistic. He said, "Why did they do that?" And McCain says something like, "Yeah, those assholes." And Rubio looked startled and looked at Salter like, "Is he shining me on?" But McCain apparently was just responding the way he responds. And so there's a time and a place for bad language.
All right. Well, on that note, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Siri.
Speaking of the devil, we're keeping that in for sure.
Right. You're listening to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we'll be back with you right after this. Tom and Carl, let's talk about Bari Weiss and the Free Press. She sold the Free Press for a reported $150 million to Paramount Skydance, which owns CBS. As part of the deal, she will continue to have creative control over the Free Press. She will also be the editor-in-chief for CBS News. David Ellison, who's the CEO of Paramount Skydance, called Weiss's appointment, quote, "a bet on intellectual independence." But Tom, the long knives are already out. Margaret Sullivan has blasted the decision in The Guardian, saying that Weiss actually lacks experience in news. And there was this other piece in The Independent saying that her first Zoom meeting with the staff was cringy. What do you make of Bari Weiss's future with CBS?
Well, we will see what happens, but I have to say it reminds me a little bit of the Chris Licht situation at CNN. Remember, they brought him in after they let Zucker go, and he was going to, turn that ship around and basically get them back to sort of being a centrist, news-driven organization. He let go of Don Lemon and Jim Acosta and Brian Stelter and all of that. But eventually you could see like there was a revolt within the ranks, and that organization did not want to be reformed. It did not want to, and so his tenure there was pretty short, and he was out. And I hope the same does not happen to Bari Weiss, but you kind of get that sense you're seeing this leaking, and some of the rank and file members of the organization are bitching and moaning about her. And so I think it's going to be it's a tough job. It's a big job. There's a lot of change that, and an institution like CBS and CBS News in particular, which is, it's the Tiffany network. It was, has a long history of very proud history of its news. And I'm sure that there have been, a lot of people there have been a long time and are looking at her, a young whippersnapper. What is she, like 41? And saying, who does she think she is? And she doesn't know better than me. And so I think it's going to be a tough job for her. I wish her the best. It's obviously a huge success story of leaving the New York Times, starting something from scratch and building it with massive success over a relatively short period of time and garnering enough respect among folks, pretty widely to get the attention of David Ellison and be put in that position. I mean, he's taken a big gamble on her for sure.
Yeah. Carl, what do you make of it?
Well, Tom said it reminds him of Chris Licht, and that's the bad side of it. The good side of it might be, do you remember the comedian Bill Burr, he had this skit when Trump was first elected, how um, Seth Meyers and Obama lit Trump up it was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and then Bill Burr said, and then he said, well, then he took your job. You made fun of him at this thing, and then he decided to get your job. It's a funny bit, and he had some of the details wrong, but Bari Weiss has run out of the New York Times, and maybe thinks her career in journalism is over. Some people think she starts this thing, and now she's going to be very wealthy. She, and look, she was a traditional liberal Democrat. She gay woman, married. She supports Israel, which was a liberal position until relatively recently. But does she have the chops for this job? That's a legitimate question. She's, Margaret Sullivan says she doesn't have enough news experience. Margaret Sullivan had a long time news experience as an editor and reporter, and then became a columnist. Bari Weiss was a columnist. She doesn't have a lot of broadcast experience. It doesn't seem like on paper she's qualified for that job. CBS doesn't want her to make the trains run on time. Though the new owner, Ellison, what he wants apparently is a newsroom that has the values of old-fashioned news gathering, which is not to be partisan. And that's a tough thing to pull off, even if you have a lot of experience and you're trying. And so I wish I wish her the best. I approve of what she's done at the Free Press, and I think I write a lot about the future and past of journalism and where we are, and I'm troubled by where we are. But I just think this is going to be a heavy lift, Tom and Andy. I don't know if she has enough experience to do it.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Philip Wegman, RCP White House reporter, joined by Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Our guest today is Eric Trump, the executive vice president of the Trump Organization. He's written his first book, Under Siege: My Family's Fight to Save Our Nation. It will be available everywhere starting next Tuesday. So, Eric, your team is keeping this thing under lock and key. We haven't gotten a chance to read it yet, but we're looking forward to it. So, to start things off, just tell us, when did you tell your father that you were going to be writing this family history? What was that conversation like?
Well, I got sick and tired of people trashing him, and I love my father. He's one of the greatest people in the entire world. He's one of my best friends in the entire world, and I started this probably 18 months ago, and I had to put the story down. They've done everything they could to destroy my father. They've done everything they could to destroy our family, and that's why I called it Under Siege. And I came up with the title Under Siege before Butler, Pennsylvania, before they tried to kill him at his golf course, because that's what they did to me, right? I didn't have any constitutional protections. I wasn't, part of the executive branch. Who was I? I was a civilian that was running the Trump Organization. I became the most subpoenaed person in American history for doing absolutely nothing wrong. I've never gotten so much as a parking ticket. Yet every single day, subpoena after subpoena from every congressional committee, from every Senate committee who was trying to make our lives miserable, including, by the way, every DA and every AG in every state around the country. They tried everything they could. They made up the Russia hoax. They called me up, the FBI, and said that we had secret servers in the basement of Trump Tower communicating with the Kremlin. It was an absolute joke. They made up the dirty dossier as a way to embarrass my father, embarrass our family, split up our family, try and discredit him. That didn't work. They impeached him the first time. Then they impeached him the second time. Then they went after all his Supreme Court justices. Then they took him off the ballot in Maine. They took him off the ballot in Colorado. They took him off of Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. They put more gag orders on him than you could ever possibly imagine. They indicted him 91 times. They kept us locked in a courtroom every single day. They debanked us. They debanked our entire organization, Capital One, Bank of America, JP Morgan. I could literally go through all of them. They weaponized every single tool that they had against our family, against my father, against me personally. And by doing so against the United States of America, they were going after conservatives left and right. And you know this because you saw the IRS target churches, religious organizations in this country, strong conservatives. You see what happened this week with obviously the list, and literally them spying on congressional members, on senators. You saw them spy on my father's campaign in 2016. This was Under Siege, guys. This is what they did. This is the worst of government. And honestly, it's a great ending to the story that we won, and we won in spectacular fashion. I couldn't be more proud of that. But I had to write this story of the viciousness of politics and what people are willing to do, to take down a family and a movement when they don't like who you are.
Yeah, from my perspective, covering this White House and then the first Trump administration, one of the biggest differences is that there's no special prosecutor this time. James Comey has been indicted and arraigned today. Robert Mueller is now in the rearview mirror. So I guess my question for you is, do you think the siege that you write about is over, or is your family preparing for more investigations and possibly another impeachment if Democrats win back Congress?
Well, they'll do anything. They'll do anything. I mean, they don't care about the will of the American people. Let's be honest, guys. I mean, you had 7 justices in Colorado that threw my father off the ballot like a dog, right? And tried to subvert the will of everybody who lives in that state because they thought they could. Then they tried to do the same thing in Maine. They don't care about fundamental norms. I mean, you had Hillary Clinton that deleted 33,000 emails under congressional subpoena. She didn't give a damn about the rules or about getting in trouble. These people will lie, cheat, and steal as they always have to accomplish their means. That's unfortunately who they are. Here's the good news. The good news is the American people understand exactly who they are, right? Hence the reason the Democratic Party right now in this country is by far the weakest it's ever been. They also understand who the mainstream media is, right? And that's why independent journalism is the strongest it's ever been. No one trusts NBC. No one trusts CBS. Nobody trusts CNN. I mean, these networks have, all but lost and conceded their powers to the Joe Rogans of the world and 100 other people. I mean, you guys have a great independent voice, absent, a lot of the big networks. And guess what? People are tuning into that versus them because they no longer, trust the mainstream media who lied to them every single day. I mean, look at 60 Minutes, who was literally editing Kamala Harris's answers. I mean, look at Leslie Stahl, who's sitting there fighting my father, saying that they weren't spying on his campaign, where it's very clear that they spied on his first campaign. I mean, the Democratic Party, the mainstream media, has really become the PR arm, of the Democratic Party for all these years, and they've really lost their way. And so, listen, I think they will continue to do it. I don't think they know any other game other than identity politics. It's the only game that they've ever known, how to weaponize the system and identity politics. In all fairness, their platform stunk. Their policy was never any good, hence the reason they lost in such embarrassing fashion. And so, yes, unfortunately, I think they'll continue their games. And I hate to say that as an American who believes in the system and only wants to see an incredibly pure system, because America deserves so much better than what we've seen from them.
Eric, you mentioned, your dad and going through this. Can you take us back to, I mean, it seems like this kind of stuff has destroyed people in the past, would obviously destroy most people, and yet he's managed to come out stronger. But I'm also, take us back to after the 2020 election, obviously with the impeachments, you knew, and the media and Democrats, you knew that politics was a rough and tumble game. But when he was making that decision that he was going to run again, did you have any idea in those conversations what was out in front of you, this lawfare? And what were those conversations like when it was going on? How did those attacks end up making him stronger?
Yeah. Guys, maybe I compartmentalize this in 2 ways, right? I mean, it's a great question. It's actually one of the better questions I've gotten. But I see lawfare. I see the political attacks in 2 ways. You've got the games that are played within kind of the 495 corridor, and we all know them. You guys cover them probably better than anyone. You're focused on them every single day, right? I mean, that's a word politics, right? Then you take the weaponization of court systems. You take AGs in Fulton County, Georgia. You take Letitia James, who's going back and forth to the White House every 3 days. You start raiding people's homes. You weaponize Jack Smith, who's leaving classified folders and doing photo ops on the floor of my father's office, right? Barging into Mar-a-Lago with 30 agents. I was the guy who was getting the call saying, one of my guys called me, the FBI is here with a search warrant, and they're demanding that you instantly turn off your security cameras at Mar-a-Lago. I go, I'm not turning off our security cameras, right? There's a difference between kind of the political games, you're in a government shutdown, or one party trying to fight, versus turning the son into the most subpoenaed person in American history when they're in bed at 10 o'clock at night, never have had any bad habits, have been great students their entire life, have run honest businesses, have exactly 0 marks on their name, and turning them into a piñata for the other side, which is exactly what they did to us in the Trump organization, or using corrupt judges in New York. And I call them corrupt. They are. Since then, all the verdicts have been overturned, as you know. But in Gorin, I mean, You had lenders that we had as an organization who testified in court that we were the single best borrower they've ever had. And despite that, right, no defaults, no anything, they fine us $600 million and try and take away our company and our assets from us using a corrupt system, right? That's different than politics. That's vindictive and that's evil. And it flies in the face of who we are, as a democracy. So yeah, listen, going into 2021, I knew exactly who these people are and who they could be. And frankly, you guys, I said something that wasn't popular. I said they've tried everything and they failed, and I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to inflict real physical harm. And 6 weeks after I said that on Fox News. 6 weeks after I said that, and then people said, hey, Eric's an alarmist. That will never happen. That could never happen. Sure enough, I saw my father get shot at Butler. And then 8 weeks after that, I saw them try and take his life again at a golf course in Florida. Guys, I've seen the worst of politics. I've seen the worst of this madness, including 2 weeks ago when I saw a good friend of mine, Charlie Kirk, take a bullet to the neck, right? I mean, all of us saw that and the atrocity of those videos. That's what this has devolved into, and it shouldn't be that way. It should not be that way. We're such a better country. And again, thank God we won. Thank God the madness and the swamp didn't win. And we can hopefully return to some level of normalcy.
Can I ask one more follow-up on that? How do we do that? I mean, how do we turn the ship around? Or is this, unfortunately, the new normal?
I hope it's not, guys. I hope and I pray it's not the new normal. I mean, how do we start? Let me give you the start. How about people dressed in all black stop trying to shoot conservatives in the chest or in the head, as they exercise their First Amendment right of free speech? I mean, that would be a pretty good, start. And then how about we not allow the weaponization of government? How about we not allow the weaponization of the courts? How about you don't have judicial activism? How about, judges actually follow the law? How about you don't have politically motivated, AGs and district attorneys who literally go out, as Letitia James did, and brag about if she gets elected, fundraise on this, she will go and she will spend every single day suing Donald Trump, in her exact words, right? And then going home. She was going to go into the office every day, sue Donald Trump, and go home. This was the siege, guys. This is under siege. I mean, everybody in New York wanted Letitia James to go fight crime. And instead, her entire platform, every single thing that she tweeted about was going after my father. Thank God we won because of the appellate courts, and she was overturned 5-0, including the presiding judge in New York State. But guys, if you didn't have our mouthpiece, and you didn't have our backbone, and you didn't have hundreds of millions of dollars, I spent close to $400 million, fighting against narratives that were made up and fabricated to try and destroy my father and our family. And that's not how the United States of America should work. You take any other organization, you take RealClearPolitics, you guys are, right? You guys are great at what you do. You level that kind of attack on you, you wouldn't last a month. You couldn't withstand it, right? And that's the power of government that can't be exerted against the American people and should be absolutely shunned. Everybody knows what was happening.
To follow up on that point, I want you to take your critics head on here on the weaponization argument, because they'll say James Comey was indicted and arraigned. Members of the Biden administration are now under investigation. Your critics will say you complain about weaponization, but now the current administration is doing exactly that. Is that a fair assessment, or is this not vengeance instead of justice?
Yeah, respectfully, it's almost not a serious question, right? And like I say that, it's almost not a serious question. If my father wanted vengeance against people, he could have thrown Hillary Clinton in jail for deleting 33,000 emails, right? And a whole host of other things that she did with the charity and all things. And guess what? First term, he did? He goes to be totally inappropriate. This was a former First Lady of the United States of America, and I will not do that. I will absolutely not do that. I mean, he asked for calm, yet do you know what the Washington Post article was 12 minutes after my father got sworn in? He put his hand on the Bible. This is when the impeachment of Donald J. Trump begins, 12 minutes after his hand was on the Bible, right? They didn't give him 12 minutes before they started attacking him. Did we ever raid Biden's home? Did we ever raid Hunter's home? Did they ever break into Jill's closet and raid her closet, 30 FBI agents? I mean, he had classified material all over his garage. It was stored in his Corvette, in Delaware. Did anybody raid his house? Did anybody throw him off of Twitter or Instagram or Facebook? Did anybody put gag orders on him by every court in the country? Did anybody subpoena his son 112 times, the most subpoenaed person in American history? By the way, the difference between me and Hunter Biden is I'm actually a clean human being, unlike that guy. I don't have a laptop from hell. I'll give you guys both my laptop, and you can tell me whether or not, you'll see pictures of cute kids, and my work email, and that's about it. Do we ever do any of that to him? Did we make up dirty dossiers saying that he was doing the most unthinkable things in foreign countries paid for by Donald Trump? Of course we didn't. Did we say that out of his house in Rehoboth Beach, he had secret servers communicating with Putin? Of course we didn't. It's not a serious question to say that we've weaponized government. It's not. And you can't point to Jim Comey, who is very clearly, at least in my eyes, I saw the answer that he gave to Ted Cruz, and it certainly appears to me, and listen, he'll be in front of a jury, and they can decide for himself, but it's apparent to me that it seems like he lied, right? A lot of people are saying that. So, they went after every single Republican for perjury. You guys cover this better than anybody. You could probably list as many as I could. So what, now Comey's off limits if he really did lie? And he'll have his day in court. You can't really say that we're weaponizing government. That it would be the most naive statement based on everything that that we've gone through over the last 10-year period of time.
I want to ask you, sort of related, but heading in a different direction. You are headquartered in New York City, and there's going to be a mayoral race there in just a few days, and Zoran Mamdani has also made that race, not surprisingly, about your father, right? Fighting your father.
Hey,
and I just wondered.
Shocking, right?
Yeah, shocking. No, but what do you see for the future of New York? He looks like he's going to win. It doesn't look like anything's going to stop him from winning at this point.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that? What's it going to be like? How are you preparing for that as a member of the Trump family, as the head of the Trump business? What is New York going to look like for you in a few days if this guy wins?
Well, I got to correct one thing you said. I'm not headquartered in New York anymore. I'm headquartered in sunny, beautiful Florida with beautiful palm trees and far better taxes, right? So no, I'm no longer headquartered in New York. I've been out in New York for 5-6 years, but we do have significant assets in New York, and beyond that, guys, honestly, it's a city I love. It's a city I care deeply about, right? There's no place I care about more than New York, even though I don't live there. I always say if you just took common sense and let common sense prevail in New York could not be stopped. Just give people clean streets, safe streets, a little deregulation, and just have fair taxes, right? Not these punitive taxes that you see there. Have a tax rate, similar to North Carolina, 4% or something along those lines. And honestly, New York would be the epicenter of the entire world, and no other state could even remotely compete, right? The problem is everything has to be a social experiment, and it's scary to me. Listen, do you think City Hall in New York, and I've worked with these guys, I had to save a golf course in New York. They had been building it for 30 years and they couldn't get it completed, right? And I did it in less than 18 months. Do you think City Hall is really in the position where they can nationalize grocery stores? You've got some of the best executives in the world who have tried the grocery store business, and it's hard. You've got food costs, you've got spoilage, you've got theft, you've got, it's just an expensive business, right? Inventory problems and this and that. Do you really think City Hall in all its infinite wisdom is going to do a great job nationalizing grocery stores? I say that as a rhetorical question because I see the smile on your face, and of course not, guys. It's not going to work. You have a guy who went after the NYPD saying that we should fund the NYPD. We have a guy in a very Jewish city that literally said that we should imprison Netanyahu, that if he ever came into New York that, Mamdani was going to arrest him. He's gone after Modi as a war criminal. So he's gone after the Indian population, obviously another big demographic in New York, and obviously wants to increase taxes even more. I live in a state now, and this breaks my heart to say, but you have Ron DeSantis out there every single day saying how he's going to eliminate property tax in the state of Florida, right? The reason he's able to do that is his budgets are so flush with cash right now because everybody's left New York and they've all come down south, right? And then come North Carolina, but Florida's definitely been the biggest recipient of people flowing out of New York. And yet you have a guy who's out there saying he wants to raise taxes another 10-15%. What do you think is going to happen to New York? And again, all I wish, I have no gripe with this guy. I don't know him. I've never met Mamdani. At the same time, I don't forget about Republican versus Democrat for a second. All I want is somebody who can exercise a little common sense and just stay out of the way of the greatest capitalist city in the world. New York will thrive. It does not need government intervention. All it needs, safe streets, safe communities, great schools, reasonable taxes, and to actually promote a business community as opposed to being at war against them. And that's why you're seeing so many businesses leave New York. And again, it hurts me to say that. I own Trump Tower. I own 40 Wall Street. I own buildings all across New York. I manage those buildings. It pains me to say that because it's the greatest city in the world. They should not be a social experiment. They should just have somebody who can be a good leader, and do the basics and get the hell out of the way. And honestly, the capitalists in New York will take care of the rest.
Well, let's talk about business briefly here. Debanking is obviously a big part of your story in Under Siege, and it's part of the reason why you and your family have shifted towards the crypto space. And it's been good business. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars in new wealth in the WLFI token, if the Wall Street Journal reporting is accurate. So again, can you take your critics head on here? What guardrails are there to keep partners or investors from investing in World Liberty Financial as a stepping stone to seeking curry with your father in the White House?
Another not serious question. I mean, I have nothing to do. I have nothing to do with the administration. I stay completely out of Washington, D.C. I've been in business for 25 years. In a company running a great real estate company. I had no other choice. I mean, I got debanked by everyone. We got debanked by virtually everyone because of the weaponization of government. No question that Washington, D.C. was calling these banks saying, if you bank them, we're not going to treat it kindly. There's no question that was happening behind the scenes. I had to go to cryptocurrency. I didn't really have a choice. And what I figured out very quickly is that the same people who were coming after us were going after the crypto community. I realized how bright they were. And I realized how antiquated finance was, that, the finance was slow. It was costly. It was punitive. In fact, typically the people who did well in kind of traditional financial system were guys like us who had a lot of zeros behind their name, right? And who could kind of curry favor, who could call up a Jamie Dimon and say, listen, that rate's too high. I need you to lower my rate. I need this preferential treatment, right? Whereas the average consumer couldn't. But to think that there's any link between businesses that we had long before my father even announced his re-election campaign. I mean, we were getting into crypto in a very big way when we were sitting in courthouses in New York where everybody, including RealClear, right, based on polls, and also, I'm not trying to put that on you guys, but based on your average of polling, said that Donald Trump had no chance because they were trying to indict him 91 times and throw him in jail. And so there is no conflict. My father has nothing to do with this company. I have nothing to do with Washington, D.C. And I got into crypto not because I wanted to get into crypto. I got into crypto because I had no other choice. And so if you actually look at what we're doing, I mean, we created the fastest growing stablecoin on earth, right? That started 3-4 years ago. And, it's amazing. You know what that's doing? It's actually saving the US dollar because as crypto, as stablecoins are formed, you've got trillions of dollars from all over the world that are flowing into the US ecosystem, all being backed by obviously US treasuries very well. I personally founded a company called American Bitcoin. We mine Bitcoin in the United States of America using Texas Energy in West Texas. We're one of the biggest miners on earth. We're doing it the right way here in the United States of America, paying massive amounts of taxes, right? The reason I have trouble with these questions is, no one was going after Hunter Biden for having 300 different entities, and I say that a little bit facetiously. What product? I mean, I ask you guys that question. What product were they selling? Like, what did they have a website? I mean, they were doing awfully good business. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a business that didn't have a website that made as much money as the Biden family, right? I mean, all of a sudden, when his father got into presidency, he learned to become a great artist very conveniently. A guy who had never painted before became a masterful artist that could all of a sudden sell his artwork all around the world at ridiculous amounts. Guys, you know who we are. We've been a four-generation company that's focused on assets. That's who we are. We found digital assets 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, before my father. And honestly, crypto's growing. It's the fastest growing industry in the world right now. And I am so proud to be on the forefront of that. But if you really think that, that has anything to do with Washington, D.C., come on, give me a break.
I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to ask sort of a broader question about the MAGA movement, which, your father basically single-handedly, by the force of his personality and will, refashioned the Republican Party into this incredible movement. And, as he looks to exit the scene at some point in the near future, Eric, how do you see the MAGA movement continuing, or does it I don't want to say die, but does it diminish when he's not, leading it? Or who do you see as the heir apparent to carry the MAGA movement forward, and where does it go from here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm not sure if I've been asked that, but in a very different context. Listen, I would have told you that call it 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago during the first administration, there probably wasn't an heir apparent. My father was in Washington, D.C. rhino hunting, right? Every day was a Ben Sass or was one of these people, right? I mean, my father shot more rhinos in Washington, D.C. than, right? I mean, he eliminated most of the rhino class. And what came out of that? People who were able to fight, people who had a loud voice, people who wouldn't be silenced, people who would stand up for right and wrong. And so I think if you look at kind of the Bush party of politics, the McCain party of the Republicans versus kind of the MAGA movement today, I think you just have a very different group of people in there. And I think the group in there today is younger, they're stronger, they're louder, they're less enamored by the system and probably more determined to do great. And so my father really rewrote the rules of politics. And so to your question, I think 10 years ago that would have been hard. Who's the heir apparent? I think that's a hard question. I think right now there's a lot of heir apparents. I mean, I know JD very well. He's a wonderful guy. I mean, clearly he's one of them. Marco Rubio, a wonderful guy. He's clearly one of them. But there's 100 names. I mean, look at my wife. I don't mean to kind of shell in nepotism here for a second, but here's somebody that was very new to politics, but incredibly capable person, as you guys saw. She went in, despite the fact that Democrats were mocking her every day. She took over the RNC. She quadrupled their fundraising. She cut 3/4 of the people out of it. She stopped buying, lavish flower displays, and she went in and she turned out the early vote. She, made damn sure that there was going to be voter integrity in states across the country, right? She marched millions of people out to the polls. Again, she raised record sums. And she's become an incredible voice and there's a million of them. And so I think can
I ask you, I guess, why is it a jump ball when we have these discussions about who the heir is between a Vice President JD Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio? Normally, wouldn't the assumption be, hey, JD Vance is the next man up. He's the one who's going to run in 2028. Is that an open question in your mind?
Listen, I mean, I think unlike the Democrats, we're going to actually have a process, right? No disrespect. Well, maybe a lot of disrespect to the other side, but I mean, no one had ever seen somebody. I mean, how many delegates did Kamala get in a 24-hour period of time, right? Like they literally threw Biden to the wolves, and then miraculously, like 18 hours later, she had secured every single delegate to all vote for her in a miraculous fashion. I mean, give me a break. Like, tell me that wasn't the greatest coup that wasn't talked about by anybody. On the Republican side of the ticket, And by the way, it was interesting with Kamala that happened because she was the first to drop out of the race in 2020 with absolutely zero support in the polls. So the person who was the first to drop out, who had zero support, all of a sudden miraculously just embodied the hearts and minds of the entire Democratic process. Give me a break, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, why is it a jump ball? I think JD certainly has a leg up being vice president. He's amazing. He's the right age. He's got the right temperament. He would certainly have my vote. I love the guy to death. He's fantastic. But we're actually, I'm sure in this country, going to go through a process where people will probably run off against each other in the Republican primaries, and the people that are actually chosen by Republicans in this country will actually be the person who stands on the ballot against the Democrats in 2028. And so just to say that his name should be eliminated, it shouldn't be eliminated, right? And by the way, if we're stupid enough to eliminate other powerful people in the Republican Party, we're no better than the Democrats were in 2024 when they tried to pull the greatest coup in the history of politics, which no one wants to acknowledge.
What role do you think your father will play in that primary competition?
A large
Certainly,
one.
He's not going back to Mar-a-Lago just to golf.
If there's one thing that we can probably all agree on in the political circles, it's probably my father will play a very, very large role. I mean, it's his endorsements, like it or not, but his endorsements have been incredibly powerful. He endorses somebody, 99.9% of the time they win. And listen, I study politics like you guys do, and I can name very few exceptions to that rule. Maybe you can mention one, but I doubt is short of like a catastrophe happening. So listen, I think he's going to probably be a big part of that. And frankly, as kind of the founder of the new Republican Party, he probably deserves to be a big part of that.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where this movement goes. And I've been, the way that he refashioned the Republican Party and turned it into, turned orthodoxy on its head from trade orthodoxy to foreign policy, right? But also turned it into a working class party. I mean, that
Yeah.
to me, why do you think, and I know people say, why has he become such a powerful voice among the working class? He's,
Yeah.
raised a billionaire.
Yeah.
I know there's the construction angle and he likes to wear a hard hat, but what is it about Trump that your father that has a connection with, working class folks of all, Latinos, blacks, doesn't matter. They all seem to, he's moved the needle with all of them.
Tom, because he's not, I can't curse on camera and I won't, but because he's not full of you know what, right? And I mean, let me give you an example that you'll remember very well. You'll remember this like it was yesterday. Do you remember when he flew into the Iowa State Fair? And
On the
he,
helicopter, yeah.
you know what he did? Yeah, he flew in on the Trump helicopter and he's dressed in his dark blue suit with a red tie on, and you have all these other candidates walking around. I won't, criticize any of them because they're all our friends these days, but you know who all of them were, the Republican nominees. And, they went to Dickies and they bought Carhartts the day before.
Right.
And guys, the sticker was still on the Carhartts and they bought these steel-toed boots and, they rented a Harley Davidson 3 blocks away. They don't know the shift pattern on the Harley because they'd never ridden a motorcycle before and they come barely making their way into the Iowa State Fair. And by the way, Americans can see phonies from a mile away, So what did my father do? He threw on a suit and tie, flew in on a Sikorsky 76, and decided to start giving kids rides around the fairground in his, very expensive helicopter. Like, I think he was himself. He was himself. He never placated to people. He spoke his mind. He was uniquely Trump. And people love that. Listen, the guy epitomized, he certainly at the time, he was the epitome of the American dream. Certainly now he's the epitome of the American dream. But, people like that. People were drawn to the success. People were drawn to the fact that he was no BS. I think, and one other thing, guys, just if you can zoom out to kind of, just the macros of society right now. You also had a Democratic Party that tacked so far to the left. I mean, I'd go all over the country. I'd be talking to a steel miner, a guy who was working at a steel factory or a coal miner in Pennsylvania. Eric, I love you guys, and we are 100% behind you. But if my grandfather knew that I was voting for a Republican, he would shoot me. And I said, let me ask you a question. If your grandfather saw me swimming in, as a guy who's 6'5", 215, swimming in collegiate women's sports, what would he do, right? Well, if his daughter was in the pool, he would probably take you out back and beat you half to death, right? And the point is that the guy actually wasn't a Democrat. He was actually a Republican. The party has just changed substantially. They wouldn't be into having kids get poisoned by fentanyl. They wouldn't be into, again, kind of these woke movements, right? I mean, the Democratic Party has changed a lot. If you go back and you look at JFK, and you guys have probably studied him pretty extensively, who's more like JFK than Donald Trump? I mean, JFK wasn't into wars. He was trying to stop. He wasn't into the industrial war complex in this country, right? Like, I mean, go through the things that JFK stood for and go through the things that my father stood for. Go through the things that Bill Clinton talked about, in terms of immigration and so many other things. And go through my father's speeches. I'm talking about old Bill Clinton speeches. They're not much different, right? The only difference is today's Democratic Party has, they're fighting for craziness. They're fighting for indoctrination of our children. The changing of, revisionist history and textbooks. It's crazy. It's crazy, and people can't align with that anymore. Again, guys, which is why my father won the popular vote. He won every swing state, and every state in the nation. And you guys know this because you're closer to polls than every state in the nation went to the right.